good evening tonight? Good. So when I was a little kid, not quite a teenager, we moved around a lot. So I was usually a new kid in school. When you combine that with the fact that I was just kind of weird, and it didn't take a whole lot to make me cry, I was kind of a target. I had friends. I did make some friends, not many. Really the only kids waiting for me after school were waiting to make me cry. But it's okay, that's not what this story is about. I just want you to understand the person that went into high school. For some weird coincidence, the high school in my school district ended up with a school for the performing arts, which changed my life. Now, I wasn't in the program. You had to audition and have talent. But I attended there, and eventually I decided I would, I'd volunteer to build sets for the school show. And that's where I met the lighting crew. Now, the lighting crew was the student organization that did all of the lights and the sound in the school theater. And they were like, kind of like the school AV club. But you have to imagine a school where like the football team can't make it to the championships without the help of the AV club. Because we didn't have quarterbacks. We had dancers and we had violinists and actors and singers. Our field was the stage, and the lighting crew owned the keys to the theater. Everyone on the lighting crew was somewhere on the spectrum between nerdy and artsy. And for the first time in my life, I found my people. And so I joined immediately, and I had a community for the first time that was not just my family. Being on lighting crew was amazing because we got to do all kinds of cool stuff with the shows and setting up the lights. But when we weren't working on stuff, we could just do whatever we wanted in the theater because we had the keys. We would sit up all night playing loud music through the sound system. We would put on light shows. And if you were lucky, which I wasn't, you could probably get lucky because there was lots of, quiet, dark, secluded places where two people could hide. It was an amazing thing being on lighting crew. The theater was our playground, but the lighting booth, that was the clubhouse. That was the place that you were when you weren't in class during the day, which for me was most of the time, actually. One day I went into the booth and there was a senior crew member in there and he was filing away at a key. He was making a copy of the key to the booth. We had keys, but there was only 2 sets. And that meant that there was always a lot of waiting around to have somebody let you into the clubhouse. So this guy was making his own. Now there's 2 things that you have to be aware of when you're making a key by hand. The first thing is the profile. So when you hold up a key and look at it sideways, the profile is that little mountain range of bumps and divots. And that is what makes your key unique. That's what means your key will open your apartment, but not the apartment next door. The other thing that matters is called a blank. And a blank is just any key that doesn't have a profile cut into it. But there's different kinds of blanks, different shapes and sizes, and each one fits into a different kind of lock. And that's why your apartment key will fit into your neighbor's lock, but won't open it. So you need those 2 things. Now we had the profile, because we actually had school keys. But all the keys in the school were made on a blank that was restricted. You couldn't just go to a hardware store and get it made. So we couldn't just copy it. Somebody had discovered quite a while before us that there was a blank that was very similar. If you took a file and you widened one of the grooves along the side and made it just a bit wider, it would fit into the school lock. And once you did that, you could just copy the profile onto it and you had a working key to the booth. This was like an unofficial rite of passage for people on the lighting crew. Not everyone did it, I want to be fair about that, but most people did it. I did it initially, the first time, I did it out of convenience. Like I said, I was cutting class all the time and I wanted to hang out in the booth. I didn't want to just be hanging out in the hallway somewhere, so I made myself a key. The weird thing though that happened, as a 15-year-old kid that had just done this, I felt really powerful in a way that I had never felt before, because keys are power. It's a power to access a restricted location. And once I felt that, the world looked different to me. I wanted to know what was behind every door. Like, what's behind that door? I've seen it all the time, and it's always locked. So the problem is I didn't want to just make a key that would open any door. I wanted to make a key that would open every door. I wanted to make a bee master. Now the B Master was a real key that was issued to the principal and the head caretaker, and I knew it was real because the crew chief on the lighting crew had a copy himself that he'd made. Now, he had the power that I wanted, but as is so common with power, he didn't want to share it. So I couldn't make one. All I could do was make more booth keys, which I kept doing because, you know how when you go to a hardware store and you make a copy of a key, it never really works quite right? Like it works, but you have to jiggle it a little bit. It's different. A handmade key is like 10 times as bad as that. It is, each one has its own unique idiosyncrasy that you have to find. Like, do you have to lift it while you're trying to turn it, or do you pull it out a little as you're turning? There's always something. And the problem with that is that makes it take more time to get into the room, and the longer it takes, the higher the risk of getting caught by someone on staff, and no one wanted to get caught making keys. So I wanted to make one that would work really well, really easily. I could just pop it in and turn it and it would work. I came to school one day ready to try a new one. I was really excited about it. And as I slid it into the lock, I looked around to make sure there was no staff, and the key slid in perfectly. The only key I'd ever felt that worked that well was an actual school key. But it wouldn't turn. Like, it was really frustrating. I kept playing with it, I kept playing with it, nothing would work. And then finally I pulled it out, and I realized that I had actually put my house key in the lock to the booth, which made me feel really stupid on one hand, but then also made me realize that there was a blank out there that I didn't have to modify that would fit into the school locks. And when I realized that, I was able to make keys that were like twice as good in about half the time it took. Yeah. So one day I'm sitting in the lighting booth, and Norman is sitting next to me. Norman's another guy on lighting crew. And he says, "So do you have a B Master yet?" And I said, "No, I don't have the profile. I can't make it." He said, "Well, I've got the profile." And but he hadn't been able to make one that worked. So we made a deal. He would give me the profile, I would make keys for both of us. And in 2 days, we both had working master keys to our school. We finally had that power that the crew chief had that he didn't want to share with us. But this time it was a little different because I made these keys onto blanks that hadn't been modified, which meant that you could just take them to any hardware store and make as many copies as you could afford. So within a month, everyone on lighting crew that wanted one had a master key to our school. This was not a good thing. Now, we were smart kids. We understood the risks involved, and we understood that we couldn't just wander around all day opening doors, or we were going to get caught, as much as we wanted to. So we waited till night, because people were expecting us to be there at night all the time. We were either setting up for a show, or we were blasting loud music and playing with fog machines. So it was never weird that we were there at night, and at nighttime, the only staff member we really had to worry about was the night caretaker, Winston. And Winston was not a problem. Winston was really cool. Winston knew we were up to something all the time, but he also knew that we were good kids, and we never gave him any trouble, so he returned the favor. Like, for instance, the one time he caught us in the school library, there was about 10 of us at night having a movie night in the school library. He didn't hassle us about how we got into that locked room or how we got the TV and the VCR from a different locked room. And he didn't say anything about our choice in movies, which was a little piece of cinema history called Naughty Nurses. We'd already watched Death Race, and to be honest, we weren't interested in any titillation. We wanted the bragging rights of being able to say we watched a porno movie in the high school library. That was cool to us. We didn't care about boobs. So the problem is that as time progressed, we were becoming drunk on our power. We were responsible. Now, don't get me wrong. What we were doing was wrong. But we were able to sort of convince ourselves it was okay because we never did anything that was bad. We never vandalized or broke anything, and we never stole anything. We borrowed stuff from time to time, but it was because we needed it. Like, we were working on stuff in the theater, and we'd be working on an amp, and it's like, oh, we need a soldering iron. So like, we trotted down to the electronics lab, B-mastered our way in there, grabbed a soldering iron, go back to the theater, we soldered up the amplifier, grabbed our soldering iron, returned to the scene of the crime, and put it away. And then as we were coming out the door, we got caught. Yeah. by the night caretaker. But we didn't realize Winston was off that night, and he was replaced by one of the guys from the day shift. And those guys did not like us. They were not cool. They knew we were always up to something. And the fact that we didn't give them any trouble meant we gave them no evidence and they couldn't do anything about it, and that just made them more angry. There was like this gang rivalry between us. It was kind of strange. So he said, how'd you guys get in here? We gave him our usual excuse that we would give to Winston. Oh, one of the cleaning staff let us in. It was simply plausible deniability so that he could say, okay, get out of here. You're not supposed to be in there. And he would let us go. But this guy wasn't buying that. He got on his radio, he called all the cleaning staff to come down to the electronics lab. And when they were all lined up in front of us, he said, which one was it? Point them out to me. Like I said, we were good kids. We didn't realize what we were doing, but faced with the reality of the people that we had been blaming, we couldn't do it. So, we took the hit. The next day when we got into the booth, the crew chief was sitting there. He had never been a part of these shenanigans. And he said, I need all of your keys now. And there was a mandatory meeting, lighting crew meeting, in the principal's office after school. If you don't show up, you're immediately kicked off. Of course, nobody wanted that. I remember going into the principal's office and looking down on his desk and seeing a giant pile of keys. It's the only time in my life I'd ever seen them all together, and I had no idea how many of them there were. People had been making copies of copies, and it got out of hand. It went viral, really, kind of when you think about it. So the principal was one of those guys that he was like a former gym teacher, like super nice guy, but also like tough. And every time he saw you, he knew your name, give you a solid pat on the back, which was never assault, but hard enough to let you know he could take you down if he really had to. And he looked at us and he said, I'm very disappointed in you. He said, I expected better of you. You guys are an important part of this school, and you've abused the power that we've given you, and it's terrible. He said, this is the worst infraction that any student has ever committed while I've been a principal. And then he said, and it was really impressive. He said, if you were to tell me right now that I had to figure out a way to make a master key to this school, I would have no idea how to do it. And you guys managed to do it, and I think you should be proud of that. But, if you ever do this again, and if you ever commit any other crime on my school, I'm not going to call your parents. I'm not going to call the police. I'm going to drag your ass down to this office, and I'm going to beat the living shit out of you. He said this to a room of like 12 kids. And then that was it. He let us go. Nothing. No call to our parents, no detention, just a solid warning of physical violence. And it worked. There was something about it, I kind of felt a little respected. Like he actually, if one of us had gone home and said something about that threat, he would have been in big trouble. And he knew we weren't going to do it. Partially because he knew we didn't want to explain while we were there. But I felt like there was this sort of mutual respect between us. And I didn't cut any more keys. I stopped for like 4 whole months. And there's only one reason why I started. I was sitting in geography class. Coincidentally, Norman was right next to me. And our geography teacher was one of those guys who would lock the door at the beginning of the class, so you were like boned if you were late. And we're sitting there and he's going on about, karst topography or something, I can't remember. And all of a sudden the door swings open and this vice principal sticks his head in and asks a question. And then as soon as he gets his answer, he closed the door and left. And I have no idea what that question was because I was watching his keys. And as soon as he left, I looked over at Norman to see if he'd noticed the same thing, and he had. That vice principal used one of our keys to open that door. I'm Zebulon Pike. Thank you very much.